What's something you thought only happened in movies until it happened to you? Story 1. My current situation. So after I left college, I found myself at my parents' place for, several months trying to get a jump start on my life, but only running into dead ends attempting to apply for jobs in my field. So I was stuck delivering pizza for Domino's for the time being. Around halfway through July, I recalled my dad saying something about the Washington Conservation Corps, an AmeriCorps program that would be the perfect place to start in order to get experience. So I look online, see all the open positions, and apply to each and every single one. I wanted to get on with it so badly I didn't care if I was out of the area. I got callbacks for interviews from 5 crews, most of which are in area, around Seattle, except one, a forest restoration crew out at Wenatchee. Due to the distance, that one had to be a phone interview, and I just assumed at the time, after it finished, that it would just kinda be so like the others. The Wenatchee guy is the first guy to call back and say yes. I'm excited, of course, but it also opens up a daunting challenge, finding a place to live in less than 2 months. I've never lived on my own before other than at college, so me and my family go and look up places. Most are out of my budget. The few that aren't are snatched up too quick. It has to be the middle of this month, September, and my final chance comes from a room to rent. I do everything to increase my chances. Not only answer the questions honestly and show I'm interested in the place, citing my job as the reason for looking, but also requesting to see it in person and even visiting with the main roomie for a couple hours. After that, I wait for the weekend, biting my nails, hoping I get it, since if I don't, I'll have to turn down the position and be back at square one. Tuesday morning, prior to work, person texts back, describing it as a tough decision, but I won out. So now I'm about to embark on my biggest life change so far, living with 2 roommates, both girls, and I'm a guy with a bunch of geek friends I would fit in perfectly with, and outdoor adventures on my job in a new area and a fresh start. We'll see where it goes from there. Obviously, your own sitcom. Part of it sounded like the typical thing of the person living in their parents' basement or working some sort of dead-end job. I thought that's where it was going. But now, I can see as I was reading along how it does seem to be a sitcom. I mean, the whole thing of both the girls and him being a guy, that's very 70s. I know that sitcom. I'm pretty sure you know it too. But there could be some pretty good ways to touch on that for writers in a modern sense. We'll see how it goes. Story 2. Destiny bringing 2 people together. I don't actually believe in that, but here's what happened to me. In the summer of 2015, I took my brother, who was on leave at that time, to a Fish concert. While my brother was getting beers for us, I saw a very attractive guy eating cotton candy. I approach a hot guy and strike up a convo. Long story short, we exchanged numbers and parted ways. Over the next month, he took me out on 3 amazing dates. We got to know each other, and I could tell we definitely had a connection. One night, he was taking me home. He told me he's got some stuff in his life he was working out and unfortunately couldn't pursue our relationship at that time. I was upset, but totally understanding and appreciative that he was man enough to let me know. Fast forward to a year later. Hot guy texts me out of the blue. We catch up a bit over text, and he eventually asks me if I'd like to go out and catch a drink with him. I said I'd love to, but it could only be platonic. I had a boyfriend at the time. We'd never ended up getting drinks to catch up. I wanted to, but I felt like it would be inappropriate to my current boyfriend. Okay, so fast forward another year. Hot guy texts me again. He says he's going to a couple of fish shows coming up and has been thinking a lot about me. I got butterflies like a little schoolgirl. Truth is, I hadn't stopped thinking about him since I had first met him years ago. He asks if I'm still in a relationship, and I happily inform him that I'm single. We set up a time to meet up for dinner, and it went great. We still had the exact same feelings for one another than we had when we first met. That was over a year ago, and we've been together ever since. That's beautiful. It's also the nicest thing I've seen in a very long time. Wow, that was really great. Everyone was really respectful of the people they were seeing at the time. And yeah, it does sound like it was too good to be true, like it was in a movie. If you would have heard that, you thought it was just some writer's concoction. Very cool. Story 3. Really awkward. My grandpa heard me having physical intimacy loudly for a very long time when my boyfriend and I hooked up for the first time. I brought him back to my place, which was a guest house behind my grandparents' house. It was quite a night. The next morning, I checked my voicemail. There were several messages from him, and they are, "Hey, you okay? Thought I heard something. Love ya. Are you all right? Do I need to call the cops? Just call. I'm coming back to check on you. Answer the door." And that was the last message. There was no knock. He didn't even get on my porch before he knew that I was praying to God. The next morning, my boyfriend and I listened to the message in horror. We both were a little drunk, and it got amazingly out of hand. We never heard the phone. We never heard anything. Boyfriend and I left to go back to where we'd left his car the night before because safety, as my guy introduced himself to Grandpa, not blinking. I think he was a little proud of himself, and I think Grandpa respected that we never talked about it. Yeah, awkward, spicy moments with your parents. Pocket dialed my dad during a quickie with my boyfriend in high school. I hung up and cried. Then called him back trying to tell him we were watching a movie. We never spoke of it again. I think about it now and wish I was dead. Yeah, those are the kind of memories I think we all just tend to block out of our minds on a regular basis just to make sure we can function during the day. I think if those things come back in our mind, anybody would just freeze up and just have to do a little mental cleanup in our minds just to shove it back into that door we don't open to the thoughts we don't think about. Story 4. Talked to this gorgeous girl at a party for hours. We had a great time. Played drinking games, told jokes. Both of us were laughing. We had the same interests. It was great. No hogwash either. We seemed like peas and carrots. Eventually, she said she had to go leave with her friends, and I was too nervous at the time to ask for her number. She said goodbye and walked to her waiting friends in the car across the street from the party. I moaned to my friends about letting her get away, and they said, "Come on, dude, go after her." So I said, "You know what? Frack it." Downed my beer and ran to the fence in the backyard we were in, jumped it, and sprinted to her car that was still parked at the corner at the end of the street. I could literally hear the corny rom-com music playing in my head as I ran to her. Slid smooth AF right up to the car, knocked on the door, and her friend opened it. Out of breath, panting, I poked my head in the back seat and said, "Hey, I gotta ask, what's your number?" The music in my head was at a crescendo at this point, and then she responds, "I have a boyfriend." Every note in my head immediately shut off. I stared at her, she stared at me, her 3 friends in the car stared at both of us. I just silently did an about face and walked away. I swore I was in a comedy film at that moment. Oof. Story 5. I knew this guy that was down on his luck in high school and had lost faith in hard work ever paying off. I told him I was determined to find him a 4-leaf clover. Searched every day in this big field of clovers by my house. Did this for weeks and then off and on for months. A year went by, but I never truly gave up and would occasionally go out looking. I even prayed to God I'd find one because the guy really seemed to have faith in me, proving to him that working for something and believing in yourself pays off. Near the end of senior year, I had pretty much given up, but would still kneel down to look at clover patches on occasion. Then one day, my sister comes in and asks if I saw our pond. We have a huge pond. It's more like a small lake. I said, no. And she said, there are tons of 4-leaf clovers. So I go running out, and there are thousands of them everywhere. Nothing but four-leaf clovers. I gave one to the guy, and he was seriously moved. He got into the military, and every now and then he sends me a pic of the clover. He always keeps it with him. Friendship goals. That's unbelievably kind. Sometimes little things make an enormous impact. Story 6. You know that scene in the movie where the main character gets blasted with water from a passing car? It's raining, everything sucks, then just to drive it home they get doused? Well, everything sucked. It was raining. Walking a mile and a half back home in a torrential downpour with multiple bags of groceries, having some deep thoughts or whatever, when vroom, splash. This miniature tidal wave just wrecks me, absolutely soaked. I stopped walking, watched the car drive away in disbelief, then started laughing. It actually made my night somewhat better because it was just so unexpected. I 100% thought that it was made up for movies. I was wrong, and very wet. Careful on those sidewalks, people. One time I was walking down the sidewalk with my now ex. I was on the inside. He was next to the road. I guess he saw it coming, grabbed me, and shielded me with his body. Is it me, or does this kind of seem preventable? Like they were probably walking right next to a very obvious puddle when this could have happened. It might not be, I admit. They probably had only one place to walk on, and they couldn't walk far enough away from the puddle where they couldn't get hit, but I don't know. What do you think? Story 7. I was approached by 3 dudes I've never met in my life when I was 12, who then proceeded to bully me. One who looked like a dang near carbon copy of Dudley Dursley, movie version, and 2 skinny minions. I was 70 pounds soaking wet and a tiny girl child, so Dursley smacked the frog I'd just caught out of my hands and squeezed it in front of me until its eyes began to swell. The other 2 jeering in the background. Sucks for him, though. I spent most of my childhood stomping through creeks, lifting up fallen tree logs bigger than me like it's woodland CrossFit. I could pick up sewer covers by that age barehanded. I punched him in the nose so hard I heard the crack. Dursley and his cronies went all jaw-dropped before the jerkwad threw the frog at my face for retaliation. It hit, but I caught it as it bounced off and booked. Never saw those jerks again. Too long didn't read? Found myself amidst a YA novel with classic YA novel bullies. Story 8. I was driving home from work on a rainy night when I saw a white work van driving all crazy and very fast. I slowed down and let him pass me because I was worried he would swerve in my lane and hit me, 4-lane highway. I watch him drive erratically down the road, and it's pouring. All of a sudden, he swerved, skidded off the highway, then did a 360 in the air before landing in a ditch on all 4 wheels on the side of the highway. It was like watching a bad movie scene. I've never seen a car flip in the air before or since, especially because of the dark and rainy aspect. I pulled over, called 911, and gave a statement once the police arrived. The worst part about it was that he had 2 teens in the back of the van who weren't strapped in, but they survived. Story 9. Me and my brother once saw a homeless guy. Classic homeless guy with fingerless gloves, an old army jacket, and a beard that hadn't seen a blade since Reagan probably kicked this dude out of his institution. And the kicker? He was carrying a long stick like a broom handle with a handkerchief tied around the end and all of the junk stuffed into the handkerchief. Oh, and the handkerchief was red with white polka dots. So this guy was either a method actor researching his role as a hobo in a new Little Rascals reboot, some kind of performance artist, or a time-traveling homeless man from the 1920s who hasn't discovered shopping carts. That bag on a stick is called a Bindle. I hope I get to see a real one someday. I don't doubt that this person saw what they saw, but I'm having trouble believing this was an actual homeless person, because I really doubt the Bindle was really anything useful. Pretty much every homeless person I see nowadays has a shopping cart. I guess the modern homeless person has a bit more need for a larger carrying capacity. Story 10. My wife and I went to NYC for the first time a couple years ago during the summer. We were there in August during a heat wave. We were staying at an Airbnb in the Bronx, and as we were searching for it, we were driving through neighborhoods where the fire hydrants were spewing water through the streets. Children were playing in the water like it was no big deal, literally filling water balloons with the pressure coming from it. I thought that was only a thing from Hey Arnold, but apparently it's a totally normal thing during heat waves in NYC. As a New Yorker, born and raised, this made me chuckle. Yeah, and the barrios were just like Hey Arnold. Story 11. Baguettes in France. I saw an old man on the side of the road wearing a high-vis vest, a walking stick, hunched over carrying a bag of baguettes. It's legitimately surprising that everything in France is baguettes. Hot dogs were baguettes, all bread was baguettes. I saw a kid beating his sister with a baguette. The best part is, I don't blame them. Baguettes straight out of the boulangerie are magnificent. All bread is not baguette. We have many different types of breads. Baguettes are delicious, but don't last long. In one day, it becomes very hard. So if you want to use it to punch your siblings, it's better to wait. Story 12. This legit happened to me in April. My first thought was, this is some dumb movie smeg. I'd been seeing this girl for a few weeks, and we had a hotel by Big Sur. She went through my phone while I was sleeping, and my most recent texts were 3 girls. If she had bothered to read them, she would find I often use my personal cell phone for work. I work in IT, and I was helping them with problems. But nope, she slams the phone down and runs to her car as I say, I can explain. But she just drives off to her parents who live nearby and never answered her phone. I didn't really continue to try to get a hold of her because I really don't want to be with someone that reacts that way anyway. Good just spend a few weeks and not a few years with her. Story 13. This is fantastic, and I remember it fondly. I hated this guy in one of my classes. He was pretentious and always acted like he had something to prove. I used to draw caricatures of him in class while he yammered on and on. At the end of the semester, our professors had a party during which a few of us got tipsy. Come to find out that outside class, this guy is actually fairly chill and quite witty and funny. I had made a big show of hating him, so it felt weird to end up at a bar chatting with him. We walked out and parted ways despite some obvious mutual attraction. I was almost in my car when I said, "Frack it," turned and ran full tilt into his arms. We kissed passionately on the street while bar patrons looked on. Even though we eventually broke up, it was my most Hollywood moment.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 14. Random acts of kindness among strangers. One time I was broke and on the verge of being homeless in Vegas, staying at a pay-by-the-week motel in a bad part of the city. I was due to be kicked out the next day and didn't have any way to pay the $200 for another week. I was talking to some people on a local chat and mentioned it, and one guy offered to give me the money. I was sure he'd want something for it, but I had nothing to lose, so I met him at a fast food place nearby, and the guy just handed me $300, told me the extra 100 was so I could eat for the next week too, and then just said to be safe and drove away. Never saw or heard from him again. Pay it forward right there. Story 15. Being carried away by a crowd. We were doing active shooter live drills, and a bunch of otherwise perfectly calm and intelligent people mass stampeded the moment the first simulated shots rang out. They ran straight towards the gunshots, and I only survived because someone tripping and falling created a mass of tangled people on the ground that let me break free and run out of a disabled fire exit. I expected more from my colleagues. The worst thing was, though, that if I hadn't heard the first gunshot so clearly, I would have just been another part of that crowd. Well, if zombie movies told me one thing, it's that no single gun can stop a mass crowd of people charging at you. Story 16. Landing the girl of your dreams. Had the biggest thing for a pretty pale chick in my geometry class freshman year. Made some moves that all flopped. She was quiet and all mysterious, which made me just crazier for her. Moved on, but never stopped digging for her. Most beautiful girl ever. Then one day, over a year after I graduated, I was depressed and alone. Figured I'd hit her up on Facebook because I had nothing left to lose. Got to know each other. Turns out she's just extremely shy and socially awkward. After some months of being friends, I asked her on a date. that she tried to persuade me that I wouldn't like her. My 5-year obsession wasn't about to lose that debate. Now we're engaged. I love her so much. Story 17. Was eating dinner with my mom the other day in a small restaurant. It was a pretty quiet place, so generally people talk quietly to their table. Well, the guy at the table next to us was having an interesting conversation about dogs pooping and tracking it into the house and fun dinner topics like that. So the ladies at his table were desperately trying to get him to shut up, and he finally quieted down for a few minutes, until he said, "Can I just say one more thing?" Without hesitation, the whole entire restaurant turned to him and yelled, "No!" It just seemed like something you'd see in a sitcom or something. It was hilarious. Story 18. In high school, I had an assignment due for extra credit. I left it on the table in the living room so that I wouldn't forget it as well as look over it in the morning. The morning, I noticed it wasn't there. I asked my mom if she moved it. She hadn't. I walk over next to my dog, who has half my essay hanging out of his mouth. Made him watch as I threw away all of his treats. Too long didn't read? Dog ate my homework. My dog ate my sheet music once. My mom had to write a note and staple it to the shredded paper. Story 19. My friend passed away when we were 20. I would be out in public and I would see her. Then I would get closer and realize it was just someone that looked like her. It happened pretty often. I guess I just missed her, so my brain made me see her. I had always thought it was just a movie thing. There's so many times I've seen patients I've worked on and later pronounced as passed away in public, or people I've known personally that I've taken from where they've passed away and a couple of years later see them in a crowd or in passing. It's strange. Story 20. Feeling like you can't breathe when you're grieving a close loss. It sounds so cliché. They say it all the time in movies and on TV. And then you experience it, and it's exactly the way they say. I'd lost people before, but always older, kind of expected. Recently, there was a sudden loss in our family of someone much younger, and I'm still trying to process it. After the first few weeks, it got easier, but sometimes out of nowhere, I find myself feeling like there's suddenly no air. It'll take a while. It sucks. I'm sorry for your loss. Story 21. Once stepped on a banana peel on the sidewalk just to see what would happen. Leg flew out from under me exactly like in the movies. Next thing I know, I'm on my butt on the sidewalk telling my wife, "Holy hell, those things are slippery." And you can imagine the look she was giving me. So aside from the banana, you also have the common trope of the sensible wife and doofus husband. Story 22. I've been a cop for about 3 years now in a mid-sized town. Responded to a robbery a while back where a witness said I missed him by a second or two. I go the direction the witness pointed me toward, and I send another team the opposite direction just in case. Suspect came out of the shadows in the alley and shot my buddy in the heart. His vest caught the bullet and he's okay. We caught the guy a few minutes later. Sometimes I feel like I'm living a bad buddy cop film. Story 23. Last night, I literally had a dream within a dream. It's something I never really thought happened in real life. It started with me dreaming and thinking I had woken up. I was telling my boyfriend about my dream for a bit, and after what felt like a half hour later, I actually wake up. What's crazy is my boyfriend woke up at the same time and said he had a weird nightmare. Definitely spooked me a little. I have this all the time. It's so surreal to wake up and realize you weren't actually awake. Story 24. That scene in Casablanca where Rick said the "of all the gin joints in the world" quote happened to me. I was home from college and me and all the dudes from the family go to a bar for drinks. They kept pestering me about an ex that I recently broke up with. And wouldn't you know it, she was actually in that bar, and all I could think of when my uncle sat her down next to me was that Humphrey Bogart quote. Story 25. Stuck in standstill traffic. Took the first lane I could, which is not the one I needed. I know trying to get over it is going to be a pain, until I saw the person in the car next to me was my brother, and he knew I would need over. He rolled his window down and told me to get in front, and we gave each other updates on what we knew was going on. But that timing was amazing. Story 26. Stepped on a rake. It wasn't an accident. I just wanted to see if it would actually happen. Quite painful for my 10-year-old forehead. I did the same thing when I was a young kid. Also, peed on an electric fence, not at the same time. Not proud of it, but it helps knowing I wasn't alone in doing it. Story 27. Many years ago, before cell phone cameras, unfortunately, my friends and I smelled smoke and saw speeding fire trucks, so we naturally went to investigate. A warehouse-type building had caught on fire and flames were shooting out of the upper floor. The sign on the wall clearly proclaimed A1 fireproofing. Story 28. Okay, this is kind of funny. I live in Colorado, and where I live, we don't have straight roads. Like every road in my town turns. So as a kid, I always thought that straight roads like on maps in the movies didn't actually exist. Aw, that's so innocent and endearing. Story 29. I watched two blind people, strangers downtown, run into each other. It just seemed so random. One had a dog and one had a cane. I was trying to think of something to say, but hey, you're both blind and about to run into each other seemed rude. So I just watched it in slow motion and felt like a butthole. Story 30. High-speed crashes resulting in an epic frickin' car flip. Coming home from a night out, an SUV entered from an on-ramp and went full speed into the center divide. The SUV then did an epic kickflip before landing on its roof. Luckily, everybody in the vehicle was okay. Story 31. Figuring out that my grandpa's girlfriend was trying to unalive him. When we started piecing things together, we said, this junk really happens. You just never expect to be in a situation like that. So weird. We need a story on this. Story 32. I saw a truck crash into a pond. Watching it sink was like watching a movie. Slowly going down and then suddenly pulled under. There was a sucking sound and a bunch of bubbles gurgled up. And then nothing until a bunch of stuff that was in the truck floated up to the top. It was awesome. Story 33. A hazy, tunnel vision kind of out-of-body experience hearing someone in your background on the phone with 911 or your whatever emergency number. I remember hearing a male voice going, "There are 2 people down," and being like, "I'm one of those people. I'm down." Story 34. High-velocity blood loss. I got sliced with broken glass when I fell with a bottle in my hand. The bottle smashed into my hand and stabbed pretty deep. When I got up and opened my fist, blood squirted from my hand in sync with my pulse. It was quite the oh, smeg moment. Story 35. You know how you see those raging house parties in movies that seem completely unfeasible in real life? Yeah, my neighbor throws one every year for Halloween, including hired bartenders, fire dancers, a full-blown DJ stage, and dab rigs spread throughout the house. Story 36. One time, a very large, rotund coworker of mine slipped and started rolling head over heels down a really steep hill towards me. I felt like I was in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Story 37. Driving from El Paso to Georgia, shortly after my journey began, I saw one of those signs that said, "Next gas station, holy hell, that's a large number, miles." Story 38. When myself and 3 friends all approached each other at a 4-way intersection in a completely unplanned yet perfectly timed meeting. Story 39. Gunshots. And they sound nothing like they do in the movies. I thought they were firecrackers until I saw people reacting to them by ducking and laying on the ground. Story 40. Random fireworks went off as I was proposing to my girlfriend. It wasn't a holiday or weekend. You guys are the main characters.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.